This is Karl Marx, the father of communism, born to Jewish parents. And here's Leon Trotsky, aka Lev Bronstein, another famous Jewish Marxist. This, on the other hand, is Milton Friedman, a Jewish Nobel Prize-winning economist and champion of capitalism. He's joined by a slew of other Jewish industrialists and advocates of the free market. We've seen prominent Jews on both sides of the economic debate. But is there anything Jewish about their beliefs of how a society should govern its markets? Scholars from both sides of the issue have argued that their tradition stems from the Jewish Bible. Today, we're going to evaluate these claims by asking the question, is the Torah a pro-capitalist or pro-socialist document? Here's the Mensch Sense take. There's a lot of good evidence to suggest that the Torah's emphasis on social safety nets and concern for the poor has a strong socialist undertone to it. Here are some examples. Every Jewish family was allotted land in ancient Israel that could never be permanently sold. This ensured at least the ability to maintain subsistence living through agriculture. Every 7 years, the Torah decreed that all debts would be canceled to prevent poverty spirals. Jews are prohibited from lending to each other with interest at all, to prevent the rich from exploiting the poor. And of course, there is a heavy emphasis on tzedakah, or charity, where every Jew is obligated to give at least 10% of his or her income to the poor. Some scholars have suggested that based on these laws, the Torah's utopian vision was for a society of total equality, and that its redistributive policies are proof of that. But a more careful look shows that the picture is not so simple. For starters, the Jewish legal code places property rights as one of its most sacred principles. A person's right to their property is so paramount that only in extreme circumstances can someone ever be forced to give away any part of their wealth. This is evident from the fact that 2 of the 10 commandments deals with the prohibition of theft and even of being jealous of other people's property. Moreover, the Torah acknowledges the natural existence of income disparity and possibly even approves of it. As far back as the generation of Israelites who left Egypt, there were wealthier heads of tribes and poorer commoners. Many Talmudic leaders were praised for their wealth since they were not financially beholden to special interest groups. Of course, there are plenty of biblical passages that caution against the abuse of wealth and the indulgence in selfish gains, but the accumulation of wealth itself is seen as an overall positive pursuit. Regarding the heavy emphasis on charity, it could be seen as a nod to redistributive justice, but upon inspection, it's not actually true. Unlike in other religious systems, the wealthy do not owe the poor, and the poor do not have a right to demand charity. Jewish charity is a moral obligation upon those with money to dispense it to the people they see fit. This is not out of a sense of justice as much as it is out of a desire to emulate divine kindness and generosity. Put it all together, and the ideal Jewish society looks a lot like a fairly pro-capital system. But it's still not a pure free market economy either. The Torah forbids price gouging on basic commodities, and there are instances where rabbinic authorities were known to break up monopolies and cartels. It also forbade certain unfair, hyper-competitive practices designed to bleed the competition. As mentioned earlier, there were basic safety nets for the poor, such as land ownership in perpetuity, and at times where religious courts had authority, they could occasionally coerce unwilling citizens to give their share of charity. The picture that emerges is that the Torah as an economic model sought to encourage healthy trade, competition, and accumulation of personal wealth. What kept the system from becoming too top-heavy or corrupt was an adherence to highly enforced religious and moral codes of generosity and fairness. Today's Western society features much of the pro-capital model, but because it lacks any formal moral system, there are no checks on the bad actors who exploit the obvious downsides of the free market. Junk food makers have an incentive to keep consumers buying unhealthy products. Pharmaceutical companies have an incentive to keep people sick so they can buy more medicine. And I guarantee you, the number of people today giving away more than 10% of their wealth is shockingly small. It's almost understandable that after witnessing the amorality of our capitalist system, many people today are turning back to socialist models. The problem with this is that the government is not a very good choice to enforce what they perceive to be a morally just outcome. Power corrupts, and the lessons of history prove that Marxists are no exception. What we learn from the Torah is that rather than coming from political force, the moral appeal to make the world a more just and compassionate place should instead come from our inner desire to exhibit a care for our fellow humans. an inner desire that is, quite frankly, divine. And that makes Mensch sense.